Tension still in Edo State over House of Assembly crises as PDP women protest. Governor Obaseki vows to defend democracy in the state, and the APC candidate Osagie Ezeyamu says democracy is at play. Tonight, we dissect the legal issues on the matter. And President Muhammadu Buhari is giving his blessings, and the candidates of his party handed him the party flag after meeting with Pastor Osagie Ezeyamu and some APC governors. Hello everyone and welcome to the program. We're happy today is Friday, and you know what that means? It's we're going into the weekend, and for politicians they are preparing also, especially in Edo State, where some of the politicians are also planning for campaign. For Channels Television, we keep tabs on all of those issues and matter that you need to know to give you all of the information that you need. Tonight, we take you on a ride to Edo State again, and what is being escalating crisis rocking the House of Assembly. Tonight, we shall dissect the latest developments, the issues that have been thrown up, and the legal angles to all of this matter. But first, let's check out some of these stories on our political roundup.
Ahead of the September 19, 2020 governorship election in Edo State, the Inter-Party Advisory Council is calling on President Muhammadu Buhari to ensure that there is no breakdown of law and order in the state. Addressing a news conference in Abuja, the national chairman of the council, Dr. Leonard Nzenwa, condemns the political crisis rocking the state as he expressed concerns over the situation. The People's Democratic Party says it has uncovered plots by the All Progressives Congress to rig the September 19th governorship poll in the state. Addressing journalists in Abuja, the PDP Campaign Council spokesperson, Mr. Kola Ologmadiyan, calls on the security agencies and the Independent National Electoral Commission to be alive to their responsibilities and ensure that those who breach the electoral laws are punished. The Director General of the All Progressives Congress Campaign Council for the Edo 2020 governorship election, Major General Cecil Eseka-Igbe, retired, has absolved the party of any involvement in the invasion of the State House of Assembly complex yesterday. He instead pointed accusing fingers at the Governor Obaseki-led administration, of which he says masterminded the action. And the PDP in Cross River State is preparing for the party congress slated for tomorrow, August the 8th. And stakeholders are asking delegates to ensure peaceful elections devoid of violence. Speaking to journalists in Calabar, the state capital, PDP stalwart Senator Florence Itagiwa has emphasized on the need to elect leaders of the party that will sustain the peace that characterizes the party rather than one that will divide it.
Thank you so much, everyone. Try to get a copy of your Constitution if you have it. If you have it on a digital version, you can have it on your device. So get ready. We'll become some kind of lawyer tonight, and we'll learn from lawyers, and we'll hear their debates tonight on the matter involving that of Edo State. So let's begin the conversation, everyone, shall we? The candidate of the All Progressives Congress in the upcoming governorship election in Edo State, Pastor Osagie Ezeyamu, has received the endorsement of President Muhammadu Buhari after a closed-door meeting with him at the presidential villa in Abuja. Mr. Ezeyamu was led to the meeting by the chairman of the party's caretaker and convention planning committee, Mr. Mai Mala Buni, who is also the governor of Yobe State. At some point, I will be showing you what Pastor Ezeyamu had to say about the crisis in the House of Assembly in the state. And now, Governor of Edo State, Godwin Obaseki, is still talking tough and vowing to defend democracy in the interest of the people. The governor condemned the purported inauguration of lawmakers outside the state's assembly complex yesterday, an act he describes as treasonable. Mr. Obaseki, who spoke in a state broadcast, restates that the state government will resist any action capable of causing political mutiny in Edo State. So, by the way, this is not the first time we are seeing this sort of thing happening in Edo State. Crisis in the House of Assembly. It does have some kind of history, but we dig into that tonight also as we look at the legal angles. So let us get talking on this one, shall we? We have two lawyers from the two divides on this matter. I have joining me from our Abuja studio, a member of the APC and a lawyer, Mr. Daniel Buala. And from Benin City, also a lawyer and a PDP member, Dr. Don Pedro Obaseki. Interestingly, I understand that Daniel Buala, too, is now a doctor. Thank you so much. The two doctors that are going to be on the program tonight. So let's get started. First and foremost, Mr. Buala, Governor Obaseki described the incident of yesterday as an attempted coup on democracy. How would you react to that? And that's what he says. Look, it's an attempted coup, and he will, as a governor, defend democracy in the state.
Well, thank you for having me, and it's so pleasing to see Don Pedro on the other side. He's about the smartest person in the other camp, and I'm glad he's here today, and I hope we'll have a constructive engagement. The assertion of the governor is neither here nor there. In fact, it's a statement that I believe is misleading. Because if you talk about democracy and what amounts to usurpation of democratic principles, it was what the governor started right from the beginning of the proclamation and the sitting of the House of Assembly. You know the story. 3 suits are the suits entirely in respect of this matter, although they try to mislead by giving the world the impression that the court held that the constitution of the House of Assembly is legal and that whatever they did during this period of illegality was legal. But for the records, that matter in Port Harcourt was simply to determine proclamation when the governor had his cronies filed an action and the action seeking to restrain him from declaring another proclamation when the National Assembly asked that another proclamation be issued for the purposes of having a proper and constitutional inauguration. So the judgment or order of the court in Ibadan was that, in Port Harcourt, was that he couldn't seek for additional proclamation because the one he did was normal. It has no correlation with the constitution of the members of the House of Assembly, nor the procedure that they adopted when they arrived at an illegal election of the Speaker and the Deputy at the time. Because the Section 92 is quite explicit and clear about the procedure for the inaugural meeting of the House of Assembly and for the election of principal officers. And it is very clear that members by themselves will elect. And every inaugural meeting of a parliament is not a meeting that you will have some members in absentia. It's a meeting that must have 100% of the members seated, and then from amongst themselves, they will elect the speaker. That was not followed. That procedure was not followed. So it was illegal constitution of an assembly. And you recall that in the past, how many months only God knows, they continued to rule the state without a duly constituted House of Assembly of a state, denying the greater number of the constituents in Edo State the right of representation under the guise of politics. And so what happened yesterday, they would like to tell you that they got that judgment, but don't forget, every decision you secure against an individual, if there is a motion, if there is an appeal in the matter, and there is a motion for stay pending the determination of the appeal, the law is that even if the motion has not been taken, parties cannot go ahead to take action that will force a fait accompli on the appellate court. And therefore, in the eyes of the law, there is no subsisting a judgment to be declared because of the challenge that is lodged at the Court of Appeal.
All right.
And so yesterday, what happened was that members of the House of Assembly that were with the governor, don't forget that he couldn't manage the 10 people he had before. They've all reduced to 7. One is leaving tonight. But that is by the side. Now, in determining that, they did not follow the due process of law. But yesterday, some members that were amongst his people now felt, how can the state continue to be governed without legality? They now, together in conjunction with these members that were duly and democratically elected, but were not inaugurated, were not given the oath of office, decided to have a sitting because the governor made it difficult for them to continue with proceedings in the House of Assembly there. The governor that never showed interest in the House of Assembly.
So, Mr. Buala,
yesterday
developed
just a moment, passion to renovate the place.
All right. So let's take these issues one after the other, because the issue around the legality, inauguration on one hand, the sitting outside of the House of Assembly is another thing. Let me allow Dr. Pedro to react to what you said, especially on the issue of inauguration. How do you react to that, Dr. Pedro?
I thank God that Daniel is here. It's a pity he just, I thank him for saying that I'm the smartest on this side. But it appears to be a pity that none is smart enough from the other side from my state. So they have to borrow mercenaries who are not from my state to always defend their position in my state. But be that as it may, there is no problem with that. But I want to just start with a couple of fallacies. He said that 100% of the persons must be in the house when it is inaugurated. And I want to ask him, I mean, like, the law is based on facts and precedents. What happened to Saraki? Saraki on the 6th of June, the year of our Lord 2015, was inaugurated, was sworn in. The house was proclaimed. He was sworn in as Senate President, and we are all aware that 49 members of the APC were not in attendance. Did that invalidate the process? It is very funny that many of my APC brothers are coming on public television to dispense falsehood and outright fallacies. That is aside. Number two, let's look at the case in. What is in hand is a simple case of a coup d'etat, a treasonable offense. The plans, I heard that Shehu was going to ask him now, but maybe I should just jumpstart it by saying this. A house, the parlor, the sitting parlor of one of the contestants for governorship in the yet to be held election is now became the gathering point. In Benin now we call it the social gathering, where they all assembled and then they carried out their jabberwockery with a false mace, a mace that was forged by them. That is a kick of state, is a coup d'etat. Not stopping there, let's look at it. He said those who were other members. The section 92 of the Constitution is very clear. From section 90 to section 105 are clear on the procedures of the House of Assembly. At the inaugural meeting, the Constitution has said it straight in the schedule that there must be a quorum, which must be a minimum of 1/3. That is not what the case is now. He talked about 3 court cases. The first one was on whether the proclamation of Godwin Obaseki to the House was legal. And the interpretation direct expressed was that it was legal and that the House was properly constituted. Godwin did not go to court. The Edo State Assembly did not go to court. The other side went to court. Now, there were other court actions. The first one was the judgment of September 17th. That was clear. You cannot come on public television and begin to write roughshod over a subsisting court judgment. That is nothing less than being unlawful and a very, 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 very disregard for constituted authority.
What does the judgment? What does the judgment of September 17th say about the Constitution?
That they've turned my state, a state of upwardly mobile persons, into a state governed by brigands. It is pitiable. Now, the final one, this is clear. Let me just say this clearly without any inhibition. The final one is that 3 members of the House were legal prior to yesterday. Those 3 members took 2 members whose seats were already declared vacant by our extant laws. The extant law in Nigeria says that after 181 days, you do not show up in a court, in the plenary, in any duty of the House of Assembly, it automatically becomes vacant, as declared in the Benson Alegbe and the case of Benson Alegbe in 1982. So we cannot run away from these are statements of fact. We cannot breed them and blend them in black propaganda and ungodly sophistry. That is what we have. On the final analysis, 3 persons created a speaker pro tempore amongst the 3 of them, and the 3 of them inaugurated in front of a non-clerk. They brought back a clerk that had been sacked years ago and brought him back to inaugurate. It's not funny. It's like building a castle on pillars of salt.
Right. So, Dr. Obaseki, just a moment. Let's quickly take a break. When we come back, we'll hear, during a break, we'll hear the 2 candidates speak about this matter. And when we come back, we look at what the Constitution says. I will show you, everyone, what the Constitution says about sit-ins and quorum. Then we'll get the two gentlemen on the program to react to some of these issues that have been thrown up. Don't go anywhere. We've just got started. Thank you so much, everyone, for staying with us. It's a political, legal conversation tonight on the issue of Edo State and the House of Assembly crisis. Mr. Daniel Bwala, a lawyer and a member of the APC, and Dr. Don Pedro Obaseki is a lawyer also and a member of the PDP. Both are speaking for their parties. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for coming on tonight. So let me get back to the conversation with you. There are a few issues that we need to clear the table and clear the air about tonight. But quickly, I'd like you to react to what Dr. Obaseki said as regarding how your colleagues or your members of your party who are members of the Edo House of Assembly, where they gathered, what the Constitution says about gathering outside of the House complex.
Thank you very much. And I will respond to that, and I hope I get the time that he has. But this is the strategy of these people. And Shewun, you were smartly taken away from that strategy. When he was talking, you asked him the question, what is the judgment of Port Harcourt about, and what is the status? Because he knew the judgment is only about proclamation, not constitution of the House of Assembly and the legality of their proceedings. He avoided to answer that question. That's number one. Number two, he took up an argument to say that these members gathered in the residence of someone. Now, you should have asked him, in the last 1 year or plus that the House of Assembly members have been sitting, that they call legal and legitimate proceedings, where were they sitting? They were sitting in the house of the governor. You would have also asked him the question, and I will answer it, because he asked me the question directly too, when he said they ought to have sat in the House of Assembly. Now, the symbol of authority, just like what you heard our candidate say, is what determines the sittings and proceedings of the House of Assembly. That is why, even if you sit in the National Assembly, if the mace is not there, you can't sit. You are sitting in the beer parlor. It is the mace that determines that. But then, facts that leads to the reason why they rented a place, with evidence of receipt that it is rented, facts that led to that was that these same House of Assembly members went to this building called the House of Assembly. Unfortunately, the governor had sent people who prohibited them. You must have seen and reported how that they put some sand right in front of the House of Assembly, and how that they put people on top of the roof that they want to do construction and renovation of the place. They made the sitting and the meeting in that impracticable. And where there is impracticability, the law permits under the doctrine of necessity that sitting can be held elsewhere. And I started long before when I was here on your TV station, how that the Electoral Act provides that all election tribunal governorship are to be held in their respective states. But in the last election and election that preceded that, election tribunal sat in Abuja, and these matters were raised as issues before the court. The court held that under a given situation, it was proper for the court to sit in Abuja rather than in their respective places. A good example is the case in Taraba State. So they made the sitting in the House of Assembly impracticable. That was what occasioned these people to move to a more safer place. Have you forgotten a House of Assembly elsewhere in Nigeria that sat by the roadside, right on the street? And they conduct proceedings.
Mr. Bwala, just a moment, so that we can manage the rest of the time that we have. Dr. Obaseki, let me ask you quickly, on the matter of declaration of seats vacant, what does the Constitution says about declaration of seats vacant? Can you declare the seat of members elect vacant, or is it members that have been sworn in that can be declared vacant? Clarify that for us.
Okay. Quickly, the law states clearly that anybody who does not attend, because even the day of being sworn in is a day of attendance. You have to attend to be sworn in. You cannot be sworn in your parlor by yourself, in your bedroom. So from that day, it starts counting. That is day one. And if at the end of 180 days, on 181 day, they don't even need to declare your seat vacant. Your seat is automatically vacant. That was in the court judgment of the Supreme Court of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, where even my grand-uncle was part of those who wrote that very judgment. The Honorable Justice Otutu Andrew Obaseki, may he so rest in peace. Now, that is what the Constitution states explicit. There is no outside inference. It's clear. On the second issues he raised, on the place, we also have subsisting Supreme Court interpretations of same. It happened in the case of Ladoja in Oyo State when he was impeached as governor. It also happened in the case of Peter Obi in Anambra State where he was impeached as governor. And based on that, it was nullified. Then on the issue of the mace is the symbol of authority. That is where, so when you now forge a mace and create another mace, you have created an alternative state. That is why I'm still wondering why these persons are shouting and talking vituperatively on public television when they just committed treason. The Edo State mace is there. Now, prior to yesterday, the Edo State House of Assembly was sitting in another government property because there was an ongoing renovation. They were not fighting a month ago. For the last 1 month, they have not sat in that very chamber. So by collegiate decision, they made their decision to sit in another chamber owned by government. And I heard Mr. Isaiah Muse just now that he rented the place. He forgets that his house is in the public domain. All of us know that very hall is the very last building after the second turning inside your compound. Is the place on top of where the entire upstairs is just a hall. That's the hall that was used. We all know the hall. I wish he would just wait to win an election to be governor, rather than be governor by default and running a de facto rogue state. That is what is happening. I want to beg Mr. Bwala, Daniel, you've been on public television for so long, and people are beginning to wonder whose sophistic interest you serve. The people, our people should be the recurring decimal in this arithmetic.
All right.
Anything
So,
else short of that?
Dr. Obaseki, just for a moment. So let us fine-tune and end about 60 seconds each because of our time. I look at the history of, at least in the last few years, in Edo State, it does look like we see the recurring decimal in the state where we have the House of Assembly in direct clash with the executive. But let me ask Mr. Bwala to react to what you have said. Should you he raised a very critical issue about how you are not inaugurated and how you can, what the Constitution says about getting the presiding officer to now inaugurate, then the clerk that was involved in that sense. Just in 60 seconds, how can you explain what happened in that hall that day?
That they have to be sitting in a place in a government house elsewhere because the House of Assembly was under renovation. That speaks to the message we have been saying that it is a
Mr.
government
Bwala,
of
the question I'm
memorandum of
asking,
understanding.
the question I'm
That
asking,
for 1 year you could not
Mr.
renovate
Bwala,
the House of Assembly of
apologies,
that state.
Mr. Bwala. The question I'm asking is not about we've talked about the sitting outside and we have analyzed it. I'm talking about, he raised an issue about the clerk, the mace that was used, and whether or not the presiding officer, the quorum to form a presiding officer, to select a presiding officer, to now sit over an inauguration. Just in a few seconds, can you clarify that?
Who says not less than 24 in a given situation. I was speaking to the quorum when I said 100%. 100% of the members that form the quorum. That is the fact. They didn't meet that requirement where they sat. That is case number one. And case number two, the proceedings of that day was nullified because the procedure of law was not applied. Case number three, even when some of the majority of the members were not present, they continued to sit in a place other than the place designed by law and without a justifiable reason. In the case of the sitting of yesterday, there was effort to go to the House of Assembly. The governor sent people, talks. They were removing the roof and creating a crisis situation. Alternatively, they found another place. Who didn't happen in their own case? 1 year, you could not renovate House of Assembly of a state for a legislative branch of government to sit. That tells us that you are not a development person.
All right, let's get well, this will be the final comment from Dr. Obaseki. From what we heard, the candidate of the APC said that the governor is the one that has caused this problem. How do you react to it? Your final thought?
It's obvious that Mr. Isaiah Yamu was not in Benin because we saw him in Abuja. But we all saw what happened on your television. You showed it to us. We saw the Speaker of the House standing in front of the House before the governor came in to meet a crowd already gathered. Because mobile policemen, based on a letter by Mr. Malami, the Attorney General, written on the 5th of August, that ordered the Inspector General of Police to invade the House. So why are we turning truth on his head? When you were talking to Boala just now, I decided to mute the sound so that his sophistry doesn't confuse my head. Please, in removing a speaker, that is why Saraki was unable to be removed. You do not need a third or a quorum. You need a minimum, as in the Constitution, of 2/3 majority. So if you look at 2/3 of 24, they will need 16. But assuming the other 24 was not in arithmetic, only 10 were properly inaugurated, you will need 2/3 majority of the 10,
all right,
which is the 6/3. So you need 6 persons with another person split into 3 to remove Okiye. So 3 of them sitting or 5 of them sitting is in every manner particular.
We need to close the program on that note, Dr. Obaseki. And I must sincerely thank both of you, Dr. Obaseki and as well as Mr. Daniel Boala, for talking to us on this matter. And I hope our viewers have been able to get one or two things and taking their position or whatever device that you may be. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching. I'm Sean Kimale. Bye-bye.